Thank you so much. Of course, an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm going to quickly jump into the questions because I'm sure you all had enough and more of hearing where we are in the ecosystem, the ranking that we place as India in the global ranking, precision and things like that. So I'm excited to have this panel here. I think, every time we talk to a startup, and I think the things that come to us is how do we look at mentoring and how do we look at investor connect, how do we look at enterprise connect, how do we look at more academia and industry collaboration? I think those are the key pillars that every ecosystem looks at growing, and I have stalwarts here from representing each of those. So, without much ado, I'm going to jump into a conversation with them. And of course, I'm going to start with Priya here. And Priya, lovely to have you. And as director at Virginia Tech, you work in the field of research, promotion of student, faculty exchanges, and also engage with industry leaders and professionals to upskill. You see innovation very closely in these areas, right? And but we also often see that academic research, which serves as the bedrock of innovation, has tremendous challenges, right? Transitioning into market-ready solutions. So how do you facilitate this bridge, and how can startups better leverage partnerships with academic institutions to scale innovations? And while we were talking, you were talking about a bench to bazaar kind of platforms that you've created. So could you just dive deep into that for us, please?
Thank you, Kritika. So when Virginia Tech is about a 147-year-old university. Imagine they wanting to set up something which is into research and innovation right in India, wherein research was never considered as a part of our growing up skills that we need to hone, as an engineer or any other profession. So what is happening now is we need to understand what industry wants and what should the academic institutions produce. So the gap is something that we always work. So what we did as innovation was, of course, many years ago, was to get professors of practice. So people who are industry specialists, they actually come and teach on our programs, which really helps a lot of learning that is probably a student would do post-engineering. So that's one area that we worked on. The second area, of course, is in a lab. When it gets to a product innovation, has to go to the bazaar. Now, what do we do with that? Because most of us are academically skilled, but we do not have the marketing ability to go and sell this. So what we did was to incubate one of the startups, and we realized that this particular product really did very well in the market, and it's starting to get traction. So the fruit of this labor was almost 7 years that it was in the research area. And we did something, groundbreaking innovation with sustainable material, which could be used for wound healing and food processing, and rest of the things, the same material could be done. So the need of the hour today is not just innovation, but I think to go to the next level, wherein industry probably should imbibe this as a part of their ecosystem, get these researchers, work with the industry problems, and probably produce results. So I'll stop there and then probably wait for my colleagues to probably.
No, thank you, Priya. Avnish, I'll come to you next. And, as Accenture Ventures, and given the global footprint, and I think you folks are one of the earliest to have started working on the whole innovation co-creation programs as Accenture, and you've been leading it. Given the different diverse geographic perspectives, right? How are you looking at this to, foster or fasten the whole co-innovation from a corporate setup? I'd love to hear from you on how have you gone through it, and what are some of the key elements that you're seeing to help startups scale?
Yeah, thank you, Kritika. So I think, first of all, Accenture Ventures, what we do is that we partner, invest, and acquire deep tech and deep science startups. So that's just to set the context. But the ventures team is in about 28 countries, and that allows us to access innovation from almost all the major hotspots in the world, right? And we think that that provides us the diversity in thinking and in product as well, which Accenture appreciates a lot. For example, if we're looking at startups in India, you're looking at SaaS, for example. This is a great test bed. And then once we know that the startup has found a product market fit, we can take them to our global clients, right? Similarly, startups coming from Israel, for example, have a great market in India. So the geographic dimension is very important. And I think from a startup perspective as well, I like to mention here, I don't know how many startups are remaining here, but they should look at the geographic dimension as an opportunity rather than a challenge. And even corporates should do a cultural kind of a, unlearning so that new insights can be formed rather than just trying to force a situation from one geography to the other, which will never work. So I think from our perspective, we have found that a lot of innovation is able to get escalated, when we work across the borders. And Accenture's been, for the last 10 years odd, trying to take startups especially from India to global. And we have made a number of them global leaders and category leaders from India, which is very heartening for us.
Thanks, Avnish. I'm going to change the perspective a little from after your inputs. I'm going to Vansh and Vansh. While we were chatting in the lounge area, we were talking about the funding winter. We were talking about a substantial drop in funding, right, in the last year. So, really like to hear from you, what are your perspectives on how do you seeing the trends changing? And what are some of the key things that you're working on for your portfolio startups and what are some of the learnings that you've had? Would love for the startups to hear that.
Sure. Hi, good evening, everyone. Just to firstly set a very, very brief context, what I'm representing is the Venture Catalyst Group. As a group, we're managing more than $500 million of committed capital in our existence of last 8.5 years. We've gone ahead and deployed more than $200 million across early stage to early growth stage ventures. And we've sort of created different collaborative models to work with all the kind of stakeholders that can exist in the VC ecosystem, ranging from acquiring a CVC consulting firm called Incubate Hub, right to having growth stage VC funds, thematic in terms of stages, thematic in terms of sectors. I think it's sort of given us a lot of rich learning as to what has worked in early stages, what has not worked. Answering this particular perspective of how the last 2.5, 3 years have been, I think no wonder 21 was a very different year where we sort of saw the great spike, a lot of euphoric investments happening. I think that is now hard to happen again. But frankly, from our perspective, what we have seen is as the entire country, India, we have actually fought the funding winter much better than most of the other countries. While it was for real, but I think resilient founders have sort of demonstrated what has been the backbone throughout this funding winter, even when it was the peak of funding winter in 22 and the first half of 23. The rise of family offices, angel investors, and the growth in the CVC side has actually cushioned a lot of stalled activities from the VCs, which I think has been the key backbone. And I think we have sort of also at our group level gone ahead and created a separate fund where we are only working with family offices, CVCs, to sort of continue providing this support to the entire VC ecosystem, wherein these family offices today, you'll be surprised to know that more than 50% of the investments have now started to happen from family offices, CVCs, and angel investors put together, specifically in the early stages. So I think that's been one of the most interesting fact that has shaped up in last couple of years. And I think by nature, Indian founders, specifically from tier 2, tier 3 cities, are quite frugal, very resilient, and I think that's been the key strengths. I think there's been a good mindset shift from founders' end and the investors' end, both. I think a lot of the talk since today morning has been on sustainability and sustainable growth rather than just rapid growth chasing valuations. So I think our biggest learning is we also are now focused more on investing on value creation enabling value creation rather than chasing valuation. So I think all of these corrections, the signs for the current financial year are quite healthy, quite better. I think the winter is sort of behind us and we're sort of coming out of it. I think that would be our perspective.
Thank you, Vansh, and I'll come back to you for a further conversation on very industry-specific, changes that we are seeing. But let me go to Ramesh in the meantime, and Ramesh, as Global Head of Platforms and AI at LTIMindtree, we're seeing that most startups are adopting AI, Gen AI, 70% increase, adoption in startups and acceleration. So how are you looking at it, the influence of AI and the effect in fostering groundbreaking technologies? And also a related question to that one, the influence of tech on overall, and how are your customers, how are you taking some of this to your customers as well?
Thank you very much. Thanks for that question. And whether as part of the introduction, somebody said LTIMindtree, Mindtree. Thank God somebody didn't say lemon tree. Last time somebody said lemon tree. So we are LTIMindtree, part of the L&T Group. L&T Group, $30 billion in revenues. Generative AI is moving at a pace that, in my opinion, is difficult to keep pace with by just one company. And I say that in the context of what you would have seen in the last 2 years, if it was ChatGPT 3 to a 4 to a 4.0 to a ChatGPT o1 that has emerged just about a month to 2 back. And each of these models are not incremental, they are indeed radical shift from what the earlier models were offering. And hence that's the pace at which this space is moving. And therefore our belief at LTIMindtree is that it is not possible for one company to be able to do the entire breadth of what's happening with this generative AI. To give you an example, so what we do is a multi-pronged strategy. The first and foremost obviously is we do within LTIMindtree build technologies around generative AI, and these are primarily helping us in being more productive as software engineers. How can you build code faster? How can you use generative AI to do that? And the entire 9 yards of the software development lifecycle. But more importantly, while we do that, we also work with established players. In fact, the Minister for Industries was talking about how he's extremely happy about what IBM has done here in Kochi of setting up the AI Innovation Center. By the way, we have, along with IBM, set up the most advanced AI Innovation Lab in Bangalore. This was done recently, about a month or 2 back. And hence we also work with these established players because they bring in the platform that is required for us to be able to build those solutions that we can take to customers. The third thing that we do is we work with the universities, we partner with them so that they can do some research for us in the areas that we can't invest ourselves. And last but not the least, and the most important critical component is working with startups. What we do there is not just of partnering with the startups, but we go ahead and also invest and fund the startups. So there is a startup fund that we've kept aside, and we partner with these startups where they probably pick up a white space that we can't focus on and then bring certain things that are very unique. And I'll just give you one example of the art of possible by generative AI, which probably was not possible maybe a year to 2 back, is that today, using some of these startups, we're able to build technologies that can sound human-like. If you think, saying, what's the big deal? These are human-like where you'll not be able to differentiate that on the other side. It's actually a virtual agent speaking to doing a live translation on the call with a latency of less than 500 milliseconds. And hence, if I'm speaking English and the person that I'm speaking to can only understand Spanish, live on the call, we're able to do bidirectional translation. That's the power of generative AI. And you spoke about customers that we're taking these solutions to. Both IT and ITES, in my view, and what I'm seeing close to being to the customers and the market, are being hugely disrupted. In fact, the contact center space today, earlier you would, let's say, get frustrated on a call. You call in saying that my, let's say, airline ticket I need some help with. You're on the wait, you've been put on hold, and then somebody is not able to understand your real problem. You get frustrated, you disconnect, you go to social media, you post there as to how pathetic, let's say, certain XYZ airline is. Rather than doing a post-mortem, you're able to now do sentiment analysis live on the call. And that's the stuff that we're today talking about, working with these startups, taking to our customers.
Thank you, thank you. Avnish, I want to come back to you on this note, and you know, you've done this cycle multiple times, right? In terms of getting the startups to solutionize for large organizations, right? So what are the 2 or 3 things that a startup should look at, or the key learnings that you might have had in modeling the startups to solutionize large scale, right? So whatever thoughts that you would like to share on that.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very important question in terms of how do startups solution with the big corporate, for example, like Accenture, and we ourselves are doing it for one of our Fortune 500 clients, right? So there are 3 entities involved here: Accenture, our client, and the startup. I think the most important thing which we feel is scalability. Scalability is important because clients are very big, Accenture is very big as well. So if your solution is only good for a POC and an MVP, and it cannot scale beyond geographies and beyond functions, then you know, you are not in the right place, right? So scalability is very important for big organizations. But on the other hand, I would say that that should not make you lose your originality, right? If trying to scale, you are basically becoming a cookie cutter kind of a solution, then I won't recommend that as well. So I think it's a delicate balance between originality and scalability. That's one. The second again is on the security side. So you know, if you're looking for working with a big organization, then they would like to ensure that all the security protocols are there, especially around data protection and you know, business ethics and all that. But again, there is a delicate balance between security and agility, right? If security and trying to put more secure, you know, guardrails is impacting your agility, that's again something which a startup needs to look at, right? From our perspective, one of the other things which we look at is the overall execution capability of the startup, right? What we find is that startups are great innovators. They are great inventors. But when you are working with a big corporate and you are solutioning with them, then for example, with Accenture, our motto is high performance delivered. That is our motto, and that's how you know, our clients recognize as well. But if the startup is not able to keep pace with that kind of quality in terms of execution, then that again becomes a little bit of an issue for us, right? Although we do a lot of hand holding. So I think these are some of the things which we keep in mind when we are solutioning with our smaller startups. But overall, we have seen that, you know, if you are able to bring a disruptive product or a very, you know, a product which has the ability to completely disrupt an industry or a business, then I think some of these things can be, you know, put in the second part as well, because the disruptability of the startup ultimately becomes very, very important.
No, I hope all of you are taking notes on that. That's really good, you know, piece of advice for all of you, and it comes with lots of years of experience backed to it. Vansh, I'm going to come back to you, and you know, can you briefly talk to us about, you know, we were talking about some of the traditional family businesses and you know, different sectors that are getting into funding, and the role VCs are playing in that. You know, very interesting. Could you take us through some of that?
No, I think very frankly, we are seeing this happening in various forms and manner. And I think being on the other side of the industry, I think what we often realize, a lot of these family offices, business owners, enterprise owners are partnering up with VCs, becoming LPs, and so now asking for great co-investment rights. And all of this is with the intent to scout and get into adjacent industries. You'll be surprised to know we're working with one of the largest private mining companies in the country, and very few people would imagine a company of that stature to have interest in the startup ecosystem and trying to build up a venture studio. Similarly, one of the largest FMCG brands is sort of doing that in the food category with us. We have a lot of people from the real estate, a lot of real estate developers and organizations partnering and coming out with such venture schools. So I think it's probably happening in every form and shape. A lot of times it's very explicit. A lot of times it's happening implicitly. A lot of angel investors are playing a huge role in sort of contributing to this. A lot of CXOs are today, I think we've sort of as India demonstrated a great angel investing ecosystem, and through those ecosystems we are having great mentors, great early stage backers coming in, demonstrating how innovation can impact not just top line, but also improve bottom line of these larger organizations. So I think these are ways in which all of this is happening, and there are sort of enough and more examples that I can definitely cover if time permits, or maybe offline when we network.
Unfortunately, we are out of time to continue further conversations, but I'd like to end this conversation with Ramesh, one quick piece of actionable advice for startups to collaborate.
My one piece of advice to all the startups is please don't listen to anybody. And I say that for a reason, is that, and I'll give you an example, right? So typically when we look at, and these ideas have to come from your own inner voice that you believe is a space that can be solved for. Typically accent neutralization has always been dealt with as, where you take out the accent, as in if I'm a South Indian speaking in a certain way English, accent neutralization was how do you make me speak English the Indian way. To technology today that we're talking with, some of the startups have come up with is idea where I can apply a British accent, an American accent on top of that live in a call. And hence, if you listen to people, probably they'll corrupt your mind. Please do what you think is right.
Yeah, thanks. Priya, your advice?
I hear all the corporates here. I have to speak on behalf of the university. Like you all have taglines, we have something called Utprasam, which is Thy May I Serve. So whenever there is anything which is learning and which is to serving and which is to teaching, that's where we all come in. So for us, it's more important that we train the people to what they have to become, and hands-on, minds-on is what we work on. And that's the last word, I think.
Excellent. Avnish, yours.
Yeah, I think my one actionable advice to startups here in the room is that try and have the courage to change the power equation. Do not act like a small vendor and supplier to the corporate. You are not there to ensure their future. You are there to co-create the future for them. So don't behave like a small startup. You are part of their extended enterprise, and that's how you need to present yourself.
Brilliant. Vansh, last words.
I think I'll sort of speak for the other side, which is CVCs. I think what we've realized is we internally try and follow this culture, what we call it as oath. I think the CVCs and a lot of business owners have to now start being open, approachable, transparent, and humble. Because I think gone are those days where CVC investment is just looked as a strategic investment. It comes many times in financial nature, and I think it brings a lot of credibility, a lot of good marketing, a lot of sustainable ways of growing your business. So I think that would be the message from my side to the CVCs, and completely echo with everyone what everyone said for startups.
Thank you so much. And unfortunately, we can't continue. We could go deeper into each one of these topics, but maybe next time. And I'm sure all of us are available for conversations at at some point. And do reach out to us. And thank you for having us. And thank you, everyone.